Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bruce Gordon with the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Thank you for joining us here today. And those online watching across the state and country this afternoon. We're here to announce that the Minnesota Driver's Manual has been updated to include information on what drivers and law enforcement should expect during a traffic stop, especially when a driver has a firearm. You're going to hear from several speakers today. Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington. Valerie Castillo advocated for the addition to the manual to help provide consistency during traffic stops. She'll be speaking today. Her son, Philando, died 4 years ago today during a traffic stop. Also with us today, Assistant Commissioner of Public Safety for Law Enforcement, Booker Hajus. Emma Corey is the Director of Driver and Vehicle Services here at DPS. And Clarence Castile is the uncle of Philando Castile and a member of the Working Group on Police-Involved Deadly Force Encounters. We'll begin with Commissioner Harrington.
Good afternoon. I'm John Harrington, the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety. And we're here today because Valerie Castillo has had an unending effort to help Minnesota's join other states that decide to educate drivers about traffic stop safety. But more importantly than traffic stop safety, she's been absolutely best in helping us understand what's important in reducing deadly force encounters with police. As has been mentioned, Valerie lost her son, Philando, when he was shot by a law enforcement officer during a traffic stop in Falcon Heights. And during that traffic stop, he informed the officer that he was legally carrying a firearm. That was 4 years ago today. Valerie, to say that I'm sorry for your loss can't ever be enough. I can't imagine the pain that you've gone through. And I want you to know that I recognize the courage it's taken you to relive that pain over and over again as you testified with the Deadly Force Working Group, as you've testified before the safety. During my 40 years as a cop, I've made thousands of traffic stops, and when you're on the side of the road, walking up to a window to speak to the driver, you're not really sure what you're going to find. Maybe it's a grandpa who's just didn't see that stop sign he rolled through, or maybe it's a drunk driver who's less than happy about seeing you walk up on him. For the driver, it's also a nerve-wracking experience. I've been stopped, and even when you know what to expect, there's an anxiety about getting stopped that everybody that's ever had a driver's license can recognize. You see those lights in the back rear mirror, and all of a sudden everything sort of tightens up on you, and that happens whether you're a cop or you're a civilian. But I want you to imagine what it's like if you don't know what to expect. As we know all too well, traffic stops can turn deadly, as did the one where Philando Castile lost his life. And one way we believe to reduce the danger is to have a clear understanding of what should happen during a traffic stop. Both drivers and the officers that stop them have a role in this. And so the guidance we're putting out today is really for both. I want you to know that Ms. Castillo brought the idea of updating the driver's manual to me and the Department of Public Safety so that it could improve the safety for everyone on the side of the road, cop and civilian. She requested that the driver's manual be updated to include information on what drivers and peace officers should expect during a traffic stop, especially and particularly when the driver has a firearm. She wanted to encourage consistency in traffic stops by law enforcement and to make sure that the drivers would know what to do. And her recommendations became one of the 28 announced recommendations at the Deadly Force Working Group that Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, and I co-chaired. Today, the driver's manual has been updated, and effective today, people will have that information. And I want to thank Valerie for her efforts in making this happen, because I can tell you that it wasn't on my radar. I don't know if it was on anybody else's radar at DPS when she brought it up. I had not known that other states had already done this, and frankly, while I was brand new at DPS when she brought it up, I was a little embarrassed that the state of Minnesota hadn't jumped on this after Philando had passed. That other states had gotten to this before we had did not set well with me. What does the manual tell you? It tells you that if you're a driver and you have a fire in the vehicle, to keep your hands on the steering wheel or someplace visible. when the officer approaches. It tells you to tell the officer the vehicle, tell them where the firearm is located while keeping your hands where they can be seen. Don't reach around inside the vehicle. Don't get out of the vehicle. Don't try and jump out to show us where the gun is at. What we want you to do is to stay in the car with your hands someplace we can see them and talk to us. Tell the officer and let the officer give you directions as to what they should do or what you should do. The manual also describes what you as a driver can expect from the cop that stops you on the side of the road. You can expect the driver to be greeted by the cop and to identify themselves as a peace officer. You can expect that they're going to ask you for your driver's license and proof of insurance. They're going to tell you why you got stopped, and they're going to check your driver's license and other documents. They may tell you to tell them where the gun is. What we want you to do is we want you to keep your hands someplace visible. Hands are what kills in this business, and so that's what we want you to do. Our message to drivers and law enforcement really is we want to make sure that traffic safety doesn't lead to a personal tragedy. That traffic safety is done in the interest of public safety. And we see this as guidance to law enforcement so that there is consistency across the state of Minnesota. We want everyone involved in a traffic stop to walk away safely. And at this time, I'd like to ask Valerie Castillo to come forward and say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Valerie Castillo, and my son, Philando Castile, was murdered by the police in Falcon Heights in 2016, July 6th, which is today. Unfortunately, it's a bittersweet day. It's been 4 years now, and it seems like yesterday. We're talking about 1,461 days that I have not seen my son, has not touched my son, has not kissed my son. And it brings delight that the Department of Public Safety has re-updated the driver's manual, because this little tidbit is very, very important. That bit of information can save lots of lives, because you don't know what you're gonna get when the police walk up to your car. You know that everything is legitimate. You're legitimate across the board, and then you try to be as honest as you can possibly be and tell the truth that there is a weapon in the car. And for whatever reason, we'll never know the reason. We know the excuse, but we don't know the reason why my son was shot 5 times. I mean, you're sitting in a car with your seatbelt on, and that lead is hot, baby, as far as I understand it. People that I know that have been shot, they say it hurts. And I'm sure my son was frightened, looking down the barrel of a gun, and he hadn't done anything wrong. And, have a casual conversation, and you respect the authority of the badge, and you say, "Sir, I have to tell you there is a weapon in the car." And for whatever reason, he's not here today. And it's my duty, your duty, my obligation, your obligation to do everything that we can to protect the citizens of this country. It's not a you thing, it's not a me thing, it's a us thing. We have to do everything possible to prevent the killing of citizens in our country. And if this can help, I pushed it. I sure did. I made phone calls to different states. We visited with other law enforcement. We visited with the community to get some feedback on, what do you think about this? Do you think it's something worth giving a shot? Bad terminology, but we've done it, and I pray that Minnesota can be a model for other states, the whole United States, be a model and do these things. We all can do better. I mean, we've had these wonderful working groups with all these great recommendations. Now it's time to implement them. I mean, we've got some wonderful ideas. I mean, we're talking about prosecutors and activists and ex-law enforcement and just an array of diversity, array of diverse people coming to the table and coming up with these great recommendations. And it's time to utilize them. You know, they're good ideas. They're doable. It's all about getting that information out, a person taking the time to read it and implement some of these things. And I just want to say thank you to the Public Safety Commission and Department for being that model and revising the manual, and please, you know, follow the instruction, because we all need to be on the same page. We all need to know what to expect from one another. Communication is key in surviving day-to-day living. And then when you get law enforcement in the mix, then, you know, they have a higher standard. So it's all about getting these standards and understandings together and meet at some common ground. So I think that this updated manual is helpful for the police officers and the community as well, because at the end of the day, we all want to go home. Thank you very much.
Assistant Commissioner.
Thanks. I'm Booker Hajus. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Department of Public Safety. I oversee the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Minnesota State Patrol, and Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement. I just wanted to go over a few things here. First, I just wanted to thank Ms. Castillo, because obviously being a woman of strength, to go through this 4 years ago with your son not being here, I can't imagine. But she's really done a very good job of turning pain into activism. Nicole Archibald, our Community Affairs Director, who's really helped facilitate this. What I want to briefly talk about is what the public should expect from police officers. If I was to ask everybody in here to say one word, I know it's a media press conference, but you guys will be all right. Can everybody say respect? Respect, right? But you should expect from law enforcement respect. You should expect respect. Moving forward, the officers, like the commissioner said, the officer should greet you. The officer should identify themselves as a law enforcement officer. The officer may ask you, is going to ask you for driver's license, proof of insurance. The officer is should explain to you the reason why she or he stopped you, and they're going to check the validity of your license. But through all this, the officers should show you respect. You should expect respect from police officers. On the flip side, the police officers should expect respect from drivers. Expect respect. And moving forward, and ideally, the whole goal of this is to reduce the amount of deadly force encounters. The whole goal of this is everybody goes home after a traffic stop. These recommendations here for people who are carrying firearms will give clear and concise messages to both law enforcement and citizens. If we all know what to expect during a traffic stop, that's going to be a lot better for all of us. But we should all expect respect. The officer has to respect a citizen's right to legally carry a firearm. The citizen has to respect the officer's right to perform his or her job when conducting a traffic stop. Expect respect. And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Gordon.
Yeah, we'll open up the floor for questions for any of our speakers. Go ahead.
Commissioner Harrington. Eric Rasmussen, KSTP. I know you've outlined it in the release. Can you talk about one or two of the key bullet points of the changes to the manual that Ms. Castile was instrumental in bringing about?
I'd say that the 2 points that I think of, number one is to where you put your hands. I remember my father teaching me this when I was a kid in Chicago growing up. This was part of the talk that black parents oftentimes talk about having with their kids. They said, when you get stopped, just keep your hands on the steering wheel. Keep them in the 10 and 2. That's the safest place. I think that's a key message for all drivers, white, black, or otherwise, and especially those who have firearms. So I think that's the other key message is don't reach around in the car. Yeah, you may well, and it's oftentimes a matter of even on a traffic stop. My wallet's in my glove compartment. I don't know why you put your wallet in your glove compartment, but if it's in your glove compartment, tell the officer there that, and then let the officer tell you when it's okay to go in your glove compartment. Don't just suddenly launch across the car to get your wallet out of the glove compartment, because the cop doesn't know what you're reaching for. He doesn't know what's on the other side of that dark car. So I think those are two key takeaways for drivers. And the other piece is, I'll just echo the comments of AC Hajus. When the officer walks up, he's got a duty to do. We're in the job of creating traffic safety. But creating a safe traffic flow doesn't mean you have to be rude. It doesn't mean that you have to act with disrespect. It means that you should act like a professional. And I think the guidelines that we have in this document just emphasizes that professional traffic stop relationship, that you should inform them who you are and what you're doing and what you want from them. And you should do it in a clear manner so that there isn't any misunderstanding and there isn't any discrepancy as to what you're trying to get.
Could you run through one more time, please, about if you have a weapon in the car and you're pulled over, just kind of step by step? You said it once before, but I'd love to hear it one more time. Quite
simply, put your hands at the 10 and 2 position and to keep them on the steering wheel. That's the first message, and you keep them there throughout the conversation. Because if I can see your hands on a traffic stop, then I know what's in your hands, and hands are what kills. That's what I was taught way back in '77 when I was in the academy. Tell the officer that you have a weapon in the car. I think that's just for everybody's safety. If you tell them that you have a weapon in the car, then the officer knows what they're dealing with, and they can then make the right decisions or ask you the right questions at that point. You can expect that they're going to ask you for your driver's license, and when they do ask you, you can tell them, it's in my pocket. I'm going to reach into my right pants pocket to get my driver's license at that point. So the officer knows exactly what you're doing and that you're only doing what he says to do at that point. You can expect the officer to tell you why he's stopping you, what the rationale for that is, and to go back and check your driver's license and credentials. Those, I think, are the key points.
Reg, go ahead.
Commissioner Harrington, Ms. Castile talked about implementation of these incredible recommendations that these people have come up with. What have we done to make sure officers know this is how they should act about respect? And the media is going to get it out to the general public, but how do we know officers are being trained to do what you say they need to do?
Before we put these out, we vetted this with everybody that has a police academy. So we vetted it with the post board that does all the pre-service for folks. We vetted it with Minneapolis Police Department, with the St. Paul Police Department, and also with the State Patrol's Academy. So it has already been vetted with the academy instructors who teach traffic stops, so that they know that this is the direction that they should be training future cops. The next piece of this will be to make sure that it goes into in-service training so that existing cops also are informed of this. But you're going to help us get that word out just as much as us sending out a training bulletin through the post board will get it out. You're going to help us emphasize that for everybody.
Commissioner, with all due respect, how were some of these basic guidelines that are now in the manual not already part of what law enforcement was being advised about and trained on?
I wish I could answer that question for you, but I really don't know. Some of those things, I think they were not part of the basic traffic stop that hadn't been changed probably for 50 years. I don't know that very many people had updated their manual. I can't remember when the last time ours was updated. I know that seeing what other states had done after Philando died, they updated their manuals to bring it into line with these kind of recommendations. And so the fact that it took us a little bit to do that, I wish we could have done it faster. But I don't know why we haven't, as a profession, caught up with what I think are some basic safety practices. This just seems to me to be fairly common sense. Like I said, as a teenage kid in Chicago, some of these same recommendations were the same things that my dad taught me when he was trying to get me to learn how to drive back on the South Side.
Is there a message to people of color who might be cynical that these rules might not be applied evenly to everybody?
The message is that we want everybody. This comes back to one of those lines that we had in the 28 working group recommendations. And it really comes down to the sanctity of life. And it says that we should, whenever possible, trying to make sure that every encounter between a police officer and a member of the community, black, white, indigenous, or otherwise, ends so that everybody walks away safely.
Do we know how, or should I say, do you know how many Minnesotans currently have carry permits?
I do not have that number off the top of my head, but I know we can get it. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Can we ask Ms. Castillo questions, and maybe she has a comment for the community of how you hope all this hard work you've been doing for the last 4 years, you hit the ground running. What are your hopes for the community? That when these new recommendations, I know you wanted to save lives, but what else?
Well, my hope is that everyone is on the same page and understand that we've been living by laws and policies that are so old, you know, they're so vague that, you know, you can flip it up and make wrong right. Once we get some of these policies and laws changed, then we can go further, move forward, because if you're living by rules and guidelines from 1956, I mean, come on now, it's 2020. It's time to change some of these laws because they're not working in the favor of people of color. We just gonna call a spade a spade. You know, we've been living by laws and policies that have not been changed, just like Mr. Harrington just said, Commissioner Harrington said himself, he don't know why the driver's manual for Minnesota hasn't been updated, and that goes for laws and policies as well. They need to be updated, and you know, then we all can have that equality. You know, things are not changing, we're not progressing as a society here in Minnesota, and I can say there are fewer African-American restaurants, businesses, shoe stores, a place that you can go down and have a meal after Sunday dinner. That's because the laws have not changed and we have not been allocated the way we should have been every year when that budget is thrown out there.
What's next for you in the foundation? What incredible things are you up to now?
Well, right now we're just you know, we follow the leadership of God. You know, you never know what God got in store for you. So we just, you know, taking it every day, one foot in front of the other, and God is carrying us through all these incredible things. It has been a rough journey. It has been hurtful, but my fellowship with God is leading the charge, and I don't know what we're gonna do next. There's a lot of things that I have in mind. You know, I would love to have an apartment building for some of our single moms and try to have social workers to get them where they're self-sufficient and be able to get a small business or something like that. I mean, it's a lot of things that I would like to do in Philando's honor and his legacy, because he was a loving, compassionate, and giving person. So we want to continue to give that love and compassion to our communities. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Could we ask Mr. Clarence Castillo a question?
Sure.
Mr. Castillo, you also happen to be a reserve officer for the city of St. Paul, and your message has to go with the community as well as police. What message are you sending with these recommendations?
Well, with these recommendations, that my thoughts is that everybody just try to live within these bounds and follow the recommendations, be it on the police side and the community side, because none of this is going to work if we don't all work together. I mean, like Commissioner said, we had 28 recommendations coming out of the Deadly Force Encounters work group, and this one about the addition to the driver's manual was one of them. My sister first started talking about this change in the driver's manual 2 years ago when she heard about the change in Arizona's driver's manual. And she went to work on it back then, so it's taken her this long working with the commissioner to actually get this done. And I think today is a wonderful day, being the anniversary of Philando's death and having this recommendation or description in this driver's manual come out. But in order for all of this to work, the community and police we must get on the same page and start respecting each other, just like Booker Hajus said, and working together and not being afraid of each other. The fear has to go away and the respect has to come in. Thank you.
I have one more question.
One more, and then
Commissioner.
we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
What kind of guidelines have been given to the police so that they understand what's expected of them once somebody says that they have a weapon in the car? So there's no mixed messages where, as in Philando's case, he reached for his wallet at the same time he had announced that he had a weapon.
The message is pretty clear, and I think it's laid out pretty well in the guidelines, because it really speaks to both sides of that encounter, which is we want you to act with restraint, and we want you to act with good judgment, and good judgment comes when you are giving clear instructions, giving clear requests, and when the person is complying, then there is that reduces the uncertainty. And uncertainty in a traffic stop or almost anything involving police officers can oftentimes turn deadly. So what we're trying to do here is to try and make sure that officers have all the information. He's got nothing in his hands. He's not a threat. He's told me that a gun is in the car, and he's done that voluntarily already. Once again, showing that he is not a threat, that he is being upfront with us. He's told us where the gun is in the car, and he's not reaching for that gun. Once again, all of these things should help the officer understand what kind of a threat this is, because when he walks up to the car, you don't know what you're going to encounter. So I think that's the message for officers: is we want you to ask the right questions. We want you to take the information that the driver is going to give you. We want you to use your observations so that everybody walks away safely.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.